One day the human being found a book that he had been searching for millennia, lost in the depths of a great library. This book was very coveted because it contained the key to understand the formation of life and of existence itself. The library was our own body, and the book bore a curious title: DNA, the alphabet of life. For centuries, mankind wondered what was the secret that made a living being resemble its progenitors. Where did this invisible inheritance reside? It was in 1953 that James Watson and Francis Crick, also based on the studies of Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins, unveiled one of the most transcendental discoveries in history: the structure of DNA, a double helix of geometric beauty and mathematical precision. This discovery forever changed our view of biology. For the first time, we could read, almost literally, the internal language of life. A sequence of chemical letters, A, T, C, G, that contain the instructions for building an organism. DNA was not just information, it was identity, heredity, and potential. Subscribe to my channel and you will give me identity and power to keep creating more videos like this one. Your support helps a lot to make the channel grow by being part of it. The discovery of the structure of DNA in 1953 was a before and after in the history of biology and of humanity. Until then, it was known that living things inherited traits from their parents, but the exact molecular mechanism was not known. When Watson and Crick revealed the DNA double helix, it was discovered that this molecule contained the genetic code, a sequence of letters, nucleotides, that store the information necessary to build and maintain an organism. Each cell in our body contains a copy of this instruction manual, organized in 23 pairs of chromosomes. This finding made it possible to understand how traits are transmitted from one generation to the next, develop genetic engineering and personalized medicine, solve crimes through DNA testing, study hereditary diseases with more precision, and more profoundly, to get closer to the mystery of our own biological identity. It was like finding the source code of life. Every human being receives half of his DNA from his mother and half from his father. This process occurs at conception, when the mother's egg, which contains 23 chromosomes, unites with the father's sperm, which also has 23. The fusion gives rise to a new cell with 46 chromosomes, the zygote, which already contains all the genetic information necessary to form a human being. In simple terms, each gene has two copies, one from each parent. Some characteristics are dominant, expressed with only one copy. Others are recessive, require both copies to be the same. This process is unique and unrepeatable. That is why no two people are identical, except monozygotic twins. In addition, during the formation of eggs and sperm, there is a process called genetic recombination, where DNA segments are randomly exchanged. This ensures that each new human being is genetically different, even between siblings. For decades, scientists call most of the human genome junk DNA, about 98 of the DNA that does not code for proteins. That is, it does not directly serve to build the parts that make up our bodies. It was assumed that they were useless evolutionary leftovers, random mutations, or obsolete sequences. However, more recent research has shown that this DNA may have regulatory, structural, or activation inhibition functions for other genes. Some fragments are like switches that turn on or off gene functions, and others participate in the DNA architecture in the cell nucleus. The expression junk DNA reflects a reductionist view of the genome. What was not useful for making proteins was considered waste. But that changed with projects such as ENCODE, Encyclopedia of DNA Elements, which discovered that many of these sequences have biochemical and functional activity. This confronts us with a question. Do we not really understand how the information in our body works? Are we not judging out of ignorance what is actually part of a more complex design? DNA is, in essence, a chemical molecule, but its importance lies not in its matter, but in how that matter is organized. It is not just carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, or hydrogen. It is the specific arrangement of these atoms, a microscopic architecture that can be copied, transmitted, and transformed into life. This brings us to a fascinating question. Is life just chemistry, or is there something else at play? Modern biology has shown that genetic information does not act alone. It is modulated by the environment, by epigenetic factors, by cellular interactions that are not encoded in genes alone. There are communication networks, regulation, feedback, and all this generates a complex symphony that we still do not fully understand. But what we all understand is that you can visit my online store and get some of my art whenever you want. I leave you the link in the pinned comment. This is where science and philosophy meet. From a theistic or spiritual view, junk DNA could be interpreted as evidence that we do not yet understand the totality of biological design. Some see it as the fine print of a larger code, as if there are hidden layers of meaning in life. From an aesthetic or naturalistic perspective, non-functional DNA may reflect the imperfect and chaotic process of evolution, where purposeless residues remain. It is an argument for those who see life as a result of natural processes, not divine design. From a symbolic view, junk DNA represents that which is hidden, forgotten, or not activated in us. It could be seen as an echo of the past, or even as the dormant potential of the human being, something waiting to be deciphered. This resonates with the mystical ideas of the Latin in the soul of the sealed book that must be opened. There are those who have fantasized that non-functional DNA could be a storehouse of ancestral information or even messages. From science fiction to intelligence design arguments, there has been speculation that our genome may contain data that we don't yet know how to read. This raises profound questions, such as, is our DNA just biology or also memory? What if there is a language that we do not yet fully understand? Could that language reveal something about our nature, origin, or purpose? If emotions, memories, and consciousness are the product of chemical reactions, wouldn't they simply be the result of an extremely complex machine? From neuroscience, it has been identified how certain electrical and chemical patterns in the brain correspond to specific emotions. Dopamine for pleasure, cortisol for stress, serotonin for well-being. But the curious thing is that these molecules are the same in all of us. What changes is the story that lives behind each emotion. And here, the mysteries arises. How does a combination of atoms generate love, fear, or nostalgia? Aren't just these molecules names and tags? How can matter feel? Where does subjective experience, that which we call consciousness, reside? Science still cannot fully explain how consciousness arises from matter, if it does. The dominant materialist hypothesis says that everything we are, thoughts, memories, identity, is the result of a neural process. But even some scientists acknowledge that there is an unexplainable leap between biochemical activity and inner experience. What if matter were just a vehicle? What if DNA and the body were antennae and not the very source of who we are? Some contemporary philosophers and physicists have dared to suggest that consciousness is not a product of matter, but a fundamental dimension of the universe, like space or time. In that case, biology would not be creating the mind, but channeling it. DNA speaks to us of order, precision, and structural beauty, but also of mystery. With each new discovery, biological science does not eliminate the wonder of the universe, it amplifies it. It tells us how, but it cannot yet tell us why. Perhaps that why is not written in the genes, but in a deeper place where chemistry and soul touch. And there, just where the science runs out of words, the possibility of God begins.